And evaluate when you're out there, you know you're content. I mean, you're just content with what you got. I was born in 1949 and 70 and a half years old now, so getting on and they're slowing down, but still healthy. No problems health-wise. I grew up, I was born here in Tuck, in the Point, Sanspit over there. That used to be a Sanspit. And my dad started traveling in Banks Island. That's where I grew up as a kid. It's in Banks Island. I remember starting to remember stuff over there. And then in mid 1950s, we came back, and the families were really big families by then, because children were not dying like they were before that, because some women had a lot of children, like 12, 15, 16, 18 children, and out of all those children, maybe about 3, 4 survived to adulthood. And that's how, but by the time I was born, a lot of us in my generation, with the help of medical help and that, we started surviving. We started more and more people that were born had a real good chance of going to adulthood. So that's why people today have big families in my generations, because their children were surviving.
Being up here in the north, it's special. Because you're so attuned to the animals and you're attuned to the land. I mean, when I go berry picking and I sit by myself and I look at what we have, the resources that we got sitting in front of us, and I sit, and if you're quiet enough, you'll be lucky to see the birds flying and the sick popping their heads out of the ground, and there's animals out there, and one of the reasons my dad loved when we moved to Tuck was because Tuck was rich. The land and the resources around Tuck we had everything. We had caribou, we had whales, we had fish, we had the birds, every kind of bird in our ice house. We never had to go hungry for our own bush food. My dad would, when you're plucking a goose, you get to understand, the makeup of the animal. You begin to think, my goodness, this animal, if it wasn't for this animal, we'd be, starving, or, and we wouldn't be here at all. I mean, this is part of our history. The animals and the land is part of us. And when they, they go and they hunt just for what they need. I never in my day, never saw them waste anything. And if you got extra to give away, you gave it away. I got lucky, and I have a grandson now that does hunting for me, and he comes in and he gives me, neither the ptarmigan or the geese or the ducks that I want to have on my menu. And the animals is really important to the Inuvialuit. I mean, we follow the animals before we settle down in one place, because the only reason that we settled down in one place was because we could go to the store, we could buy click, we could buy beans, we could buy rice, we could buy sugar, coffee, tea, all of the basics. It was there, but we still had to work for it.
I grew up in the old school of learning, like listening to stories and falling asleep while the elders are talking and reminiscing, and the life that they lived and the hard times that they lived through and then survived. I mean, because these stories got them remembered by somebody, and it was through storytelling. And, as a little kid, just starting to learn and understand, you listen to these and you fall asleep on those stories. But pretty soon you start getting old enough so you stay awake longer, and And the stories, you're starting to, hear it from beginning to end. So, and they're repetitious stories too. Every year, different season. Stories are told about that season and the animals and wildlife and environment that you live in.
I'm Noel Cockney from both in Tuktoyaktuk and Inuvik here in the Northwest Territories. And the thing I want to say is just like being able to like really actually listen to our elders and like really, because like the biggest thing that I've done growing up was learning from my grandparents, my Bill and Lucy Cockney, who basically taught me everything I know about actually living out in the land, teaching me a lot about our culture of like subsistence hunting, fishing, stuff like that. And another big thing that I learned from Edward and Jeannie Laney was the Northern Games, which I often demonstrate and participate in. And to be able to have things like that accessible from all of our elders, I think it's really important to actually be able to learn all sides of our culture, whether that be from traveling out on the land, to like really being interacting with other people, whether that be the social games or the high kicks, the strength games. And yeah, so it just like stuff like that, and just like being able to really have an access to all that information, and also for us to like really listen, and also for us to be able to teach our elders too. Like times are changing a little bit to like how we live today. So like really being able to like have that two-way communication instead of just having us listening to our elders, but also like us being able to share stories of like how we're growing up and how we're learning more and more instead of just by stories. So like being able to have that two-way communication is really important, I believe, so that we all continue learning no matter how old we are and no matter where we're from, and being able to have that as a background of like for all of us as Inuit people, and also in this area the Gwich'in people, to be able to have that access to all that information, whether that be from us like younger people to share a little bit more about kind of like the technology and stuff like that, so that our elders are able to express themselves in ways that they would like to as well and get their voices heard. So
Okay, in those days, initially they would be using the kayaks, but when the people in ISR here started purchasing schooners, and that's what they use, and with a little motor in it, sail, and then they would be at the mouth of the river waiting until they spotted the whales, and then they would go out, and first of all they would harpoon the whale, and then they would shoot it, and then after the whale was dead, they would tie it on and tow it back to the beach, to the shore, and that's when the women took over. They did all the butchering of the whale after it was brought in. People, number one is because we needed the fat content in our bodies to combat the cold weather, and the beluga has always been a really large staple of our people, mainly for that purpose. But it was a food source that was, I guess I wouldn't say it was easy to get, but there was abundance of whales around that the Inuvialu would be able to harvest during the summer months in the whaling season, harvest enough whales for whoever was within that group. Could have been 2 families, could have been 10 families, but and in those years the other difference compared to now too was everybody shared everything. Whereas nowadays it's more basically family that go out and but in the early days it was a real community effort with all the people that lived within that group.
The Inuvialu, you're going to have a much harder time And because it's going to be much more difficult to, to get what you need, you got to have to put all your skills to use now. Because the behavior of the wildlife is different. And we're seeing that today, like we're seeing the wildlife behavior, movements and behavior patterns changing. And to me, all I know is we're going to have to also adapt to those changes. And a lot of those changes are in regard to hunters like us waiting for the wildlife to adjust. That's a new ITK about wildlife now, because their behavior is changing. So once the wildlife adjusts, then you start relying on the knowledge that you gain from them. The traditional knowledge. We have to, we can't expect the wildlife for our hunting to continue like in the past. We got to adjust to that too. And the thing that's gonna make us survive is how are we adjusting to the wildlife. It's not the wildlife adjusting to us. It's us adjusting to the wildlife. Fish, geese, land, sea animals, the land. We're the ones that have to adjust to it. And I think, that visionary about that saw about this wildlife stuff. He saw that it was going to be much more difficult. And when I think about it, my hindsight is, personal hindsight is, he saw climate change way back then. He saw that climate change. He said, we're going to have to go through that. We're going to have to go through that adjustment ourselves as human. And he did see that,
Hi, I'm Ariel Lute, and today I'm on this island with my crew, Tuk TV. We're here to film the scientists study the land and erosion and all of that. It all started as a workshop in school, and then we have our own office now beside the youth center, and we just started getting calls to make videos for people, and yeah. We've made 2 other films last month called Happening to Us, and the other one is an Evaluate Day. We've made, yeah. Dustin Whalen hired us to film them using their equipment and showing the data, and also the community interaction with them, and it'll also be about us filming them, so it's like a movie about how all of us work together to inform the town and everyone else about erosion and climate change.
So here we are, we're at Peninsula Point within the Pingo Canadian Landmark, about 10 kilometers west of Tuktoyaktuk. And some of the work we're doing here is really, one, we're looking at the rate and the acceleration of coastal erosion here, but really along the entire coastline, how that has changed, how that has accelerated. And a site like this, we're really focused on to better understand the processes that drive that change, whether it's thermal heating, whether it's wave action from the ocean, different aspects of the environment impact the coast here. And speaking of impacts, that is another huge research avenue for us. When you see this much erosion, this much change, there is bound to be many impacts to the ocean, to the environment, and to the landscape. And so we're here looking at some of those impacts as well. So if you look behind me there, you see a massive sort of undercut and a slump feature, and it's quite dramatic. And what's also interesting is it's not unique. We see this feature all over the ISR, all over the permafrost coastline. And so what's happening here is we see about 8 meters of coastal change every single year. And that is increased up from when it was 5 meters. And so we're now in the last, 1 to 2 decades seeing an acceleration in coastal erosion in sites just like this. So, I mean, in the next week, I suspect that block on top, that portion on top, will collapse and slump down the cliff.
When I was growing up, we'd go to the Pingos, and that'd just be like a place to go with my family and have picnics or pick berries or even just climb them and play on the sand spit on the side of the biggest one. And that's just always been like a treat to go to the Pingos because it's so fun, and I don't know, it's nice and beautiful when you get right to the top. And there's lots of sand, so it was fun to play in and all of that.
He'd feed us, and we're off to do whatever we have to do. Either go to school or go outside and play, or just help my mom and dad with the dogs, or getting this, that, or the other thing. Ice, for the barrel, and dumping the honey buckets, dumping the like just doing housework as it was in those days. But yeah, and my dad. My dad was that type of a man when he used to get really worried when he used to see his cupboard start to empty. He'd lose his temper, because he'd be worried about where he's gonna get money for food. And in those days, the RCMP and the church used to give rations out. You either can go there and get your rations, or you've got furs to sell. And during that time too, Imperial Oil and the oil companies were starting to come in. And my dad, I guess, started to carve, and he started to sell them. And he started to show my brothers, this is how, what to do when you're carving antlers, or you're carving, bone, or you're carving, carving bone or antlers or whatever material he was using for his carvings. And Dad would put them on his lap, and they'd be, he would be teaching them how to carve.
Too, with some of the young ones that are beginning, I give them, try to help them with different ideas. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm from Tuktoyaktuk. I run the Tuktoyaktuk Fur Shop, which I began running in 2000 after my late mother passed away. She used to run this craft Tuktoyaktuk Fur Shop during the tourism season months. She takes in the local people's crafts and carvings, and she used to sell them to tourists, and I'm doing the same thing. And it's all under consignment. And I've been running this since 2000 every summer to today, so it's been, 19 years? All kinds of different handicrafts. They're made there's many different local ladies that do the sewings, and they bring them in. So it's not only mine. There's every piece of every artwork that the people do has a name on it. During the summer months, if you're in Tuktoyaktuk, come on down to the Tuktoyaktuk Fur Shop. It's one of the coolest places in Tuk when it's hot out.
People and show them things that they haven't seen that's actually right beside them. And I just like letting people be amazed by little things that we do in our work. And I think I might pursue that in that field. Just don't miss up on an opportunity by staying home. Always go out and explore with new people, and don't have too many boundaries that you won't miss out on things, and have an open mind to everything, and just be nice to everyone. Be nice.
Ito ayo ipag naktua ti nuvealo itingit lakan.
The dream for their life is actually the dream that my father and all the negotiators had in the initial stages of the land claim negotiations. Is, we do this type of thing for the future of our children, our grandchildren, our great grandchildren, and it's basically what my father and all the other negotiators did. And thank God that they were around to do that for us, and in my view they did very well in negotiating aspect of getting our claim settled, and basically they did that to ensure that the waters and the land and the air around us is going to be fit for our children, and they'll still be able to harvest the traditional foods that we need so badly in the Arctic here.